Hello and welcome to another edition of Virginia Wine and Song, the YouTube channel where we pair a Virginia wine or Virginia winery, both I guess, to a classic piece of pop rock, sort of underrated, although the last installment featured the Beatles, which is not really underrated, so I went off a little bit on a tangent, but usually we're trying to concentrate on the albums that are a little less known than others. And I'm going to be concentrating once again on the classic period of rock and pop. Everybody has their own definition. I've decided to choose 1964 through 1999. Of course, there was rock and pop before 64, and there was definitely rock and pop after 99. But for me, that's when it peaked, at least for me, and my interest in the whole genre. So we're going to start talking about a wine from Virginia. And then I'm going to go into the album that I'm going to spotlight on this installment. And this wine is from a winery that's one of the celebrity wineries in Virginia. We've got a couple of celebrities who own wineries in Virginia. I'm not talking about actors or movie stars or movie directors or Broadway musical stars. I'm talking about, well, the current president of the United States has a winery. But I'm going to be talking about another winery that's actually right down the road from Trump Winery. And this winery is owned by Dave Matthews. And the name of the winery is Blenheim. Blenheim Winery. Blenheim is the name of the little village. It's more of a crossroads, I think, in that part of Virginia. It's kind of southeast of Charlottesville. It's in, I believe it's in Albemarle County. I always have a hard time pronouncing that. Albemarle County, Virginia, I believe is the county that it's located in. It could be, I'm pretty sure that's the county. It could be Orange County, but I don't think so. I think it's in the Charlottesville area. And it's in a very winery area, rich area of Charlottesville. Charlottesville is the Monticello Wine Trail, which is one of the AVAs of the state of Virginia. And there are a lot of wineries in that area. You can just go to Charlottesville for a weekend and it will be hard for you to decide which wineries to go to because there's so many. It's almost like Napa Valley now around Charlottesville and Waynesboro, that area of Virginia. And Blenheim has been around for a while. I think they've been around since at least the early 2000s, maybe even the late 90s. And of course, Dave Matthews was very popular in the 90s. And I don't have any Dave Matthews in my collection. I mean, I have a couple of the stuff that I downloaded, but I don't have a CD or album by him, so I think he will approve what I've chosen to pair with this. But we're going to talk about the wine first. He's got a lot of different varietals there, whites and reds, and even I think a rosé or two. I don't think he does sparkling, but this happens to be a Cab Franc. His winery is made of sustainable material because he's a very progressive guy. And the tasting room is actually very interesting. It's almost like an A-frame, but it's kind of built into the side of the hill a little bit. So it's a very unusual design. You walk in there and it's just very warm. You feel, the wood is everywhere, and they're very, very friendly. And you can find their wines at a lot of the supermarkets, and definitely Total Wine, and I think even Wegmans carries their wines. So they're pretty popular in stores, but they're definitely worth a visit to just check it out. And I don't really want to belabor the wines too much because their wines are all superb. I mean, really, they have Chardonnay and Cab Franc, and I think they even have a Cab Sauv and Merlot, I believe. They have all the usual suspects. You can't go wrong with any of them. I know that's not a really heavy and deep analysis of the wine, but you won't be disappointed. I think the view there is wonderful too. It's a view. It's even though it's in the Charlottesville area, you don't really see a lot of mountains. He's kind of situated kind of in the rolling foothills of the mountains a little bit, but he's got a nice meadow view there, and it's just a great place to unwind and have a good time. And if you're lucky, you may even see Dave pop in. He apparently shows up kind of unannounced. He's not involved in the winemaking. I think he just owns the winery. The wine is made by a really wonderful, I think her name is Christy Harmon, I think is her name. I believe she's still making the wine, and her wines have won awards through the years. And I think she's from the Netherlands, and sometimes she's on the premises as well. So you may be lucky to encounter her, or maybe even Dave. I was there a couple of years ago, and I asked the guy behind the counter if Dave had paid a visit recently, and he said, well, he was here actually yesterday. If I would have been there the day before, I probably would have seen him. I don't know if he hobnobs with the customers that much, but he does show up. So anyway, Blenheim, great place to go. Their wines are actually screw top. I'm going to talk a little bit about the corks here. He does a lot of screw tops, and a lot of purists don't like screw tops on their wines. Their wine bottles, they like the cork, the whole romantic idea of uncorking a bottle of wine. Of course, you know, I'm a fan of corks as well. Everybody likes them, but every now and then you just want to like unscrew something and open it. And even the reds are in screw tops, and it's really the winemaker's preference whether they want to do corks or screw tops. And as far as corks are concerned, you've got the classic cork made, you know, from the trees. And they also have synthesized cork, which are like these kind of plasticky corks. You've probably seen them. They look like corks, but they're made of kind of plastic material. And they also have something called hybrid corks, which are made up of crushed up old corks that they've recycled and they've pressed into new corks. And I think they're called corrugated corks or hybrid corks, I think. So you can talk about corks for, you know, for 20 minutes or so if you want. But he does screw tops, and the benefit of a screw top is it guarantees the wine is going to be probably good. But the drawback is you probably want to open it and enjoy it. You probably won't be able to age it as long because screw tops, the seal is probably not as tight as it would be if there was a cork stuck in there. And of course, if it's a bad cork, the cork could disintegrate. And of course, that's part of the romance of wine. You happen to open up even a really expensive bottle of wine and the cork disintegrates while you're opening it. You may end up with cork in your wine, and some people enjoy that. Some people are grossed out by that, but that's part of the fun of the wine experience. But if you're going to Wolf Trap to see Dave Matthews or any other bands for that matter, having a screw top definitely has its advantages. And it's interesting to me that he even does the reds in the screw tops. I think some of his really more pricey reds, I think he does in corks. I could be wrong though. A lot of wineries in Virginia do whites in screw top because you're going to be drinking whites probably quicker than you're going to be drinking reds. A lot of people like to age the reds for a while, but like I said, you probably don't want to age a red with a screw top for too long because it may, I don't know, it may be fine, but an expert can correct me in the comments if they believe that a screw top, you can age a wine in a screw top for 8 years just as well as a cork. So anyway, that's it for Blenheim. And they have a very interesting label there. It kind of looks like a chopped down tree. It's been their label for a couple of years. So now we're going to move on to the music. And like I said, I don't have any Dave Matthews in my collection. Like I said, I've listened to his albums. I hate to say it, I'm not really a big fan of his style of music. It never really appealed to me. Had I been maybe a little younger when he was popular, I may have liked it more, but I was in my 20s when he was popular, so it just didn't. I feel the same way about Hootie and the Blowfish. I just never got their voices, and I didn't really care for their music. And there's some parallels, I think, between Hootie and the Blowfish and Dave Matthews. But I think both of them, Hootie and Dave, would approve of the album I'm picking. And it's from a band called Steely Dan. And anybody with a passing interest in music knows Steely Dan. They know about how much they are perfectionists and how they've always been sort of adverse to touring, although they're touring a lot now. There's only one left. Well, the band is, of course, the original members were led, the band was originally led by Don Fagen and Walter Becker. Walter Becker passed away a couple of years ago, but Donald Fagen continued on as Steely Dan with the band. It's really him, though, solo. He's just using the name Steely Dan because he has the rights to it, and of course he probably can get more people to come to his show if he advertises it as Steely Dan. I saw them a couple of years ago, and he was really great. He's known as somebody who is kind of cranky. He hates the term yacht rock. If you use the term yacht rock around him, he gets a little hostile. So don't use the term yacht rock next time you bump into Donald Fagen, which you probably would. You probably won't, but you never know. Don't use the term yacht rock. Anyway, I'm going to be talking about an album that is kind of unheralded for them. They had a string of really great albums in the 70s. From 1972 to 1980. That's considered to be their classic era. They put out a lot of great albums. They were really consistent, almost an album a year. In fact, I think in 74, 75, 76, 77, actually 72, 73, 74, 75, 76, and 77, all those years they put out an album, one album a year. I think they skipped 78, and then they skipped 79, and then they put out another album, their final album of that era, in 1980, and then they kind of disappeared for a while, and there was some estrangement between Fagen and Becker, but then they came back in 2000, the year 2000, and put out an album then. So anyway, this album that I'm talking about here, I'm going to pull out the big guns for this one. This is Countdown to Ecstasy. And this came out in 1973, and this is actually a very I splurged, and I probably spent a little bit more than I really should have, but it's a heavy vinyl pressing, and it's called UHQR Analog Productions, and these things are on the market currently. If you are a collector, these things eventually will be out of print. Currently, they are in print. They haven't released all of them yet. They still have a couple to go, but once these are all out, they will probably be available maybe for the next 4 or 5 years, and then they'll be off the market. And once they're off the market, they're probably going to grow in value. This came to me, and unfortunately, and I hate this, part of the cellophane came off. That really bugs me because I'm a little anal about that sort of thing. But anyway, it's a beautiful package. It almost looks like a book. It's got like a spine. The one drawback is these things do take up a lot of room. But this album, the reason I call it Unheralded is it came out in early 1970. Well, I think it came out in late 1973, the latter part of 1973, and the first album they had was Can't Buy a Thrill, which is also available on UHQR. Can't Buy a Thrill turned out to be kind of a surprise hit of an album. It had the first single was Do It Again. And then there were a couple other minor hits from that album, and then they decided to put out, kind of at last minute, they put out Reeling in the Years as a single around the summertime of 1973, and that was a surprise hit. I think that was like a top 10 hit, and the album started kind of like taking off again. So Can't Buy a Thrill kind of went back up the charts. They put out this album, I think, in the fall of '73, and Can't Buy a Thrill was still around. So people were going to the store to buy Can't Buy a Thrill because they wanted the hits. And they kind of overlooked this album, which was just released. And this album did have it wasn't a big top 40 hit, but it was an album radio hit called My Old School. And if you're familiar with classic rock and Steely Dan, you probably know that song. That's one of their standard songs. And it's also got a song on here called Bo Hisvada. I can never pronounce that, but you know the song. Bo Hisvada. It's a very popular live track that they do. And Showbiz Kids was actually a single that they pulled out. Steely Dan, they've always been sort of like ironic and sarcastic and not really a big fan of the music scene as a whole. They were perfectionists. They didn't really like doing a lot of interviews, and like I said, they didn't really perform live. I think their last live performances were in '72 or '73, and then they stopped touring, I think, for the most part, to concentrate on making albums, and they made all of their albums are great. I just picked this one because it's a little underrated, but Pretzel Logic and Asia and Royal Scam and Katie Lied and Gaucho, all those albums are just top notch and not a bum note on them. All perfect recordings, and like I said, perfectionists in their audiophile quality. That's why audiophiles like Steely Dan so much. But the song that they put out as the original single, and this was actually on Top 40 Radio very briefly, was the song Showbiz Kids, which actually has the F word in it, and the radio stations didn't edit the F word out. It was released on a single with that in. And back then, you didn't have Tipper Gore and all of these, parental watchdogs out there, because I don't know why. He also had Lou Reed put out a song called Walk on the Wild Side, where he mentions, we all know the line from that. That was on the radio too, around the same time, and that was unedited. So they were a little bit deviant by having that song released as the first single, and I think they did that basically because they just wanted to put a pie in the face of the industry, the record industry. But then My Old School started being played on album rock stations, as well as Bodhisattva. I think I finally pronounced it right. Bodhisattva, you know the song. So anyway, Countdown to Ecstasy is just, it's got a song on here called Pearl of the Quarter, which is almost like a country song, and it's kind of it's a tribute to New Orleans. It's got this wonderful pedal steel guitar in it, and it's just it's not yacht rock. Do not say yacht rock to describe Steely Dan. And for the people who don't want to spend $150 on a box set, now by the way, that's the only one I've bought by Steely Dan. I'm not going to be spending $150 on every Steely Dan remaster on UHQR. Even if I had the money, I think it would be kind of reckless to do that. And also storage space. As you saw, those things are not small. They take up a lot of space. So you can also pick up the remastered SACD, and all of them are, well, they're still, Royal Scam and Katy Lied have not been released yet. As of this recording, which is February 22nd, 2025, Katy Lied, I believe, is coming out. I think that has been released on UHQR, but the SACD of Katy Lied is coming out, I think, at the end of March 2025, and I think Royal Scam is coming out later in the summer. They're taking their time because they want these remasters are all personally approved by Donald Fagen. So if he doesn't like something, they've got to go back to the drawing board and remaster everything. So this is the SACD, which is Super CD. You can play these on regular CD players. You don't need to have an SACD player to play these. They sound probably just as good, and unless you're a real audiophile with a fine-tuned ear, you're probably not going to notice much of a difference. I do have an SACD player, and I played this in both an SACD player and a regular CD player, and I can't tell much of a difference. But if you have really, really high-end equipment, you may be able to. So these go for about $32, a lot less than $150. Plus, CDs I think are a lot more versatile. You can play them in your car. You still have a car CD player, which a lot of cars don't these days, which I'm very saddened to see. They don't. I think eventually maybe they'll come back. Just like vinyl, I think CDs will come back as well. But anyway, this is the CD. And I think David Geffen's company was involved with the remastering of the CD. So anyway, I think Dave Matthews would approve of Blenheim wine being consumed with Countdown to Ecstasy, Razor Boy, the Boston Rag, your Gold Teeth, Showbiz Kids, My Old School, Pearl of the Quarter, King of the World, and Bodhisattva. Anyway, enjoy, and we will see you next time.